All right, guys, we are back again for segment number 3 with George Bennett. And today, you all know he was over at IPTAY, so we're going to talk about that in this piece. And hey, enjoy.
All right, I was in the alumni office, and when Hootie came in, and Hootie and I are the same age. We got to be really good friends, and we traveled a lot together. And his wife and Nancy were really good friends, and our family, we all went to church and all like that. And he told me, he said, "You need to be in the IPTAY." I said, "Well, I don't have anything to do with that." He said, "Well, I think I can do something about it." So a couple of days later, the president's office called me and said, "Dr. Edwards wants to see you in his office up here in Sykes Hall." So I go up to see Dr. Edwards. He says, "George, I am moving you over to the athletic department in the IPTAY." I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, I'm going to move you over there, and I want you to go in and start raising some big money." And I said, "Well, who's going to tell my boss?" He said, "Well, I'll take care of that." I said, "I don't want to go back and tell him." And so he called Stan Nicholas, and luckily Stan Nicholas is still alive, and he can verify this story. And he called Stan Nicholas and said, "I'm moving George Bennett from the alumni office over to the IPTAY." And so I went down to the IPTAY in Fike Fieldhouse and started down there working with Gene Woolman, who was the executive secretary of IPTAY.
Okay.
And my job was going to be, I was going to go out and get what we call then big money. And anything big money then was anything above $100.
Okay.
And so we started some new levels of IPTAY. We put in a $250, a $500, a $1,000, and a $2,000 membership.
Yeah.
And so that was my responsibility to get all that started. And so I started traveling. I'd leave Clemson on Monday night or either Tuesday morning and come back on Thursday night, and I was visiting everybody all over the state, trying to get them convinced that they ought to start giving more money. And Hootie was really easy to work with. He came up with the idea. He said, before a football game, there's really not a whole lot for me to do after we get in the dressing room. He said, "If you want to have a luncheon before the game, I'll come over and speak to that crowd." I said, "Oh, would you?" He said, "Yeah." So he said, "Yes." So we started inviting people who would give us $500 or more to a luncheon before the game.
Yeah.
So that helped out a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
And the first year, we had 3 people to give us $2,000. Calhoun Lemon, who was a past president of IPTAY, George and Nancy Alley, and Nancy just died just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Maxon, who was from Macon, Georgia. So those were our first 3 $2,000 IPTAY members. And that was big money back in those days.
So 2,000 was kind of like Riggs now?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and $2,000 then was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so,
what year was that?
That was about 1972 or 3, somewhere right along in there. And so that was what my job was. And Hootie challenged us. He said, "Y'all, IPTAY's not even raising enough money to cover scholarships." And at that time when I went there, IPTAY was raising $378,000. So he said, if you want to be as good as you say that you are, then you needed to raise enough money to cover the scholarships. And at that time, $500,000 would cover the scholarships.
Okay.
So we set a goal of $500,000 to raise that next year. And we really worked hard to raise that $500,000. We actually raised $526,000 that year. But everybody was just ecstatic about the fact that we had raised $526,000.
Yeah.
In fact, some people said, "Well, you better count your blessings now because you'll never do that again." They were very short-sighted. Yeah. And so then Carol, he was the mayor of Marion, Carol Atkinson. He was the president of IPTAY. He said, "We need to be raising $1 million." And that was the first time that I ever heard anybody say we need to be raising $1 million. He was the very first person. So we start working real hard, and I'm working real hard in IPTAY, and Gene's doing what he's got to do in IPTAY. And long about 1977 was the first year that we raised $1 million. And we were the very first athletic booster club to raise $1 million. And everybody's eyes got that big.
Yeah.
And then Gene retired, and I took over as executive secretary of IPTAY. Now, I'd been working in IPTAY,
Yeah.
but he was executive secretary of IPTAY,
Okay.
and I was actually had the title of assistant athletic director in charge of fundraising for finance and all.
Okay.
And then we raised $2 million in 1979, and that was a really astronomical fee for us at that time too.
So it jumped from 1 million to 2 million
million.
in 2 years?
Yeah, but we'd gone to a couple bowls during that time.
Yeah. But was that because you took over?
Well, I'd like to think that, but I don't think that's right. I think it's because we had some success that we gone to a bowl. We hadn't gone to a bowl in a long time, you know.
Yeah.
And so when we went to a bowl in 1977, that gave us a whole new kind of a rising star.
Yeah.
Now we need to end off right here because I got a story about 1977.
Awesome. Hey, hold on till next time. That's it for segment number 3.